Hey everyone, my name is Andrew Davison and you're watching Conversations in Pop Culture, and we are back to the basics. And before I introduce my guest, I do want to remind everybody that this episode is brought to you by Pocketjack Comics, who have books like Palace of the Golden Princess and White Lily. You can find their books at pocketjackcomics.com, and they are being distributed through Filbo Distributions, so go check that out as well. But enough about that, because I have with me comic creator Ben Lacy, who it's been a while.
Hello.
It's been a while since you've been on my show. So obviously a lot is going on, and we're going to talk about that. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. You're
Oh
right.
yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy to have you on anytime. Obviously, I enjoy several of your books.
Oh, good.
The ones that I read, which is Shark of War, I really enjoyed. I did
Oh,
not get a chance to read the Vicious Vixens yet. I'm sorry, I'm a little unprepared. I'll take the L. I hope you understand. I hope you're sympathetic on my case. I just didn't get around to reading that yet.
Mhm.
But you got a book right now on Kickstarter, Samson, which is currently funding, and we're
Right.
going to talk about that in a second here. And I kind of tip my hat a little bit, but why don't you quickly introduce who you are, because it's been a while since you've been on my show.
I'm Ben Lacy. I'm a comic book writer, sometimes artist, mostly writer, who publishes his own indie comic books. I've done Shark of War. I've done Vicious Vixens. I've done The Cthulhu Man. And right now doing the third issue of Samson. Well, actually, issues 1 through 3 are on Kickstarter because I have all my back issues. Samson is the story of a young boy in Auschwitz who is experimented on by the Nazis, who are trying to create a super soldier. Instead, they create Samson, their greatest enemy.
Yeah, so let's get into this, because obviously I don't know the exact way how to describe this genre, because it's superhero, it's history, it's a version of history, it's obviously war, military esque. I'm not exactly sure how I would describe, but it's all of those things, right? I think is a good way to put it.
Yeah, I think if it's to some degree a superhero comic book. It's a serious superhero comic book. Like if you like Mark Miller, um, you know, um, Miller's work. If you've liked Alan Moore's work, if you've liked the Captain America by who is it that did the Winter Soldier. If you like that kind of story, comic book, then you'll probably like this because it's a war-based superhero story.
So let's talk about this, because obviously it's not a fun, you're, for lack
Oh
of a better
no.
word, you're getting high, chilling
Mhm.
out on your Friday night type of book. I mean, it's a thought provoking book, and I read the first issue, and there's a lot going on
Right.
in this book, on a multitude of levels, and we're going to get into it. But where did the idea come from? Because it's such a, I don't want to say it's out of the box, but it's definitely a step away from what everybody else is doing with the bad girl art stuff, and it's
Mhm.
very different in that realm. And that's why, because you didn't reinvent a new topic and a new area, but you're definitely taking a different side of, I feel, comics, where it's not this fluffy bad girl art stuff, and it's like an adult book,
Right. Right.
but it's not porn. I want to make that crystal. Like, does that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah. I
saying it
mean,
that way
I
for a
do
reason.
Vicious Vixen, so I am not above doing some,
I'm fine with it. I
fan
think
girl stuff with some fangirl art in it, but
I think
that's
people
not this
sometimes
book.
I think sometimes people forget that an adult comic book does not have to have sex in it. It
Yeah.
can deal with real complicated themes, and it could be adult, but you don't have to, put fan fiction, girls in bikinis.
Right.
You can have a real adult book that's dealing with real issues and real topics without having to, have a girl in a bikini. But if you want to put a girl in a bikini, totally fine with it. Just
Yeah.
want to make that crystal clear.
Yeah, the idea for it came, a number of years ago. I was thinking about, I'm Jewish, and most of the comic book creators that created the most famous characters were Jewish. Um, but there weren't many Jewish superheroes. The Thing kind of got retconned, and Kitty Pryde kind of occasionally is Jewish. But I was like, it'd be interesting to create a Jewish superhero, and I wanted to give him an origin that made him that would be unique to that kind of person. And obviously, I knew about the experimentation on Jews in Nazi concentration camps already. So that was kind of the impetus for it. Is this real event that happened, they did a lot of experimenting on Jews and other concentration camp prisoners as well. During World War II, most of those experiments were utter nonsense, pseudoscience, just killing people, mostly sadistically, in the name of science, supposedly. But they happened, and of course, this is a superhero comic, so in this case, the science is successful, and they succeed beyond their expectation. They create, they give him powers which enable him to escape Auschwitz and eventually turn the fight on the Nazis themselves. In issue 3, he actually is joining the battle in World War II. Previously it focused on him getting his powers, him escaping Auschwitz, and now we're actually where he's getting to fight in World War II. At the same time, it's kind of an epic story because there's two different timelines. There's during World War II, and then there's right after the Cold War, when the fall of the Berlin Wall is revealed that there are still Nazi super soldiers still out there, and the adult Samson now has to go and try and hunt them down. And that's kind of what you saw in the first issue. And in the second issue, that one of those people is put on trial, and it kind of goes badly. And that's also based on a real life event where they've captured Nazi war criminals and brought them back to Israel for trial.
Mm-hmm. I want to dive into this because I think this is absolutely fascinating. And I'm Jewish, and I'm well aware of all this. Obviously, it's our history. So what I think is really interesting is that obviously we have this character who's experimented on, and then now he has superpowers, and he becomes the Nazis, top enemy essentially, and is fighting against them. And this really, and then maybe I'm reading into it, but it creates a very interesting moral situation because I don't know if Samson and his brother were the first, but they were early on enough in being experimented on, being their superpowers, and it creates such an interesting thing because there's a moral component to this where you now have, I guess, a superpower you didn't want because you probably don't want to be experimented on.
No,
but at the same time, now you have the ability to, I guess, face your oppressor and stop them from doing this continuously. And it's almost like a weird moral obligation you didn't sign up for, but now you're opposing the thing that created you. And,
Mm-hmm.
and it creates such an interesting moral question, right? On that. And that's what's so interesting about your book. That's one of the things that I think is really cool is that we're now, because obviously, I don't think anybody likes a Nazi. And
Right.
I'm not trying to be funny about that, but
Yeah.
we obviously know the Nazis were bad. And after the fact, looking back, World War II, it was pretty bad. Nazi Germany was pretty bad. But the idea is that that's what's so interesting because it's a huge moral question actually being asked in this book beyond the superhero stuff. And that's what I think is so interesting because you're touching upon something that I don't think is touched upon in modern day superhero works.
Oh, and yeah, the villains here are real. The situation, the universe here is a little different than our universe because obviously you have the impact of super beings on it, and there'll be more super beings popping up in the subsequent issues. And he and his brother are very happy to join the fight against the Nazis. Not only because they for revenge, but for justice and for helping other people, which is a big part of what you see in issue 3 is where they run into a group of the French resistance trying to fight some Nazis, and they're about to get whomped, and he leaps in to join the fight. And at first they're just trying to escape Germany, and then they wind up feeling compelled to join into this battle. He more so than his brother, who's a little more reticent to jump into the action.
Because it's really interesting because it's also the idea now that also and I don't know if obviously they're facing obviously Nazis and they're jumping into the action, And I don't know if they're going to be facing other super soldiers.
Yes, they are.
So now it's like you're facing super soldiers who are akin to you to some degree, but are also, fighting against you and probably have ideals for who they're fighting for. And it creates such an interesting, I guess, dilemma and situation, but also you want to stop the problem because you don't want this Germany Third Reich advancing. That's where it just gets so interesting for me is that like there's that going on, and then we get superhero fighting each other in a war format. That's the other thing too that is interesting because what the heck was that? Um, sorry.
Oh, no problem. Well, a lot of German soldiers, were just, you probably just saw themselves as soldiers, but some of the Germans who were true believers, like the SS people and things like that. So we're going to see, Germans who are, just soldiers, and we're going to see Germans who are, hardcore believers and who are Nazis. In fact, that'll be something that'll be popping up a lot in issue 3, both during World War II and then later on when we discover the people trying to use this super soldier formula to make a new Nazi party, and create a new Reich, and the villain of that is going to be revealed in issue 3 too. So a lot going on in issue 3. So it's a good. Getting the first 3 issues, a good jumping on point to read the whole book.
So yeah, so let's go into that too, because obviously we have 2 other timelines, or we got 2 timelines going on.
Mm-hmm.
That's also what makes this interesting is that not to spoil it, but it's kind of spoiled, is that we know Samson survives the war. So, and obviously we get to fast forward. I'm not exactly sure what year he enters the war, but it's somewhere between like 1938 and 1945ish.
Well, he escapes Auschwitz in 44. So that's about when he enters the war, at that time. And then, he's obviously, you're right, he does survive the war. We understand that he winds up going to Israel, at least for some amount of time. We haven't gone into the details of that yet. And then he winds up in the United States, where he retires due to some personal problems that you start to see in issue 2 that he's having in his life. So he's retired, but he gets, when the Berlin Wall falls, they found this new Nazi super criminal hiding in Chicago. And they ask him to bring him in because obviously he'll do a better job of it than trying to send in a SWAT team to bring in someone with superpowers, especially this level of superpowers. So that's where he winds up going. And he's skeptical, but then he realizes, wow, this guy really is here, and you didn't expect that. And that's what we see in issue 1. And issue 2, he's bringing him back to Israel for trial. And this kind of follows, I don't know if you're familiar with the John Demjanjuk story, who was accused of being Ivan the Terrible, but it kind of follows that story of this person in Chicago who was accused of being this particularly sadistic Nazi concentration camp guard, and he was brought back to Israel for trial.
So and then obviously, Cold War happens, and then that happens, and then now, because the story is that now he's getting out of retirement to some degree because he discovers that a new Reich and a new regime wants to bring back the Reich, and they figured out how to make super soldiers, and now they're going to be making, and they probably have made super soldiers. And so that's the thing that's really interesting, is that because we have the war stuff of him in 1944. Wow, I can't speak today. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's been a long day. In that, but then we also now have 20, 30, 40 years later of him now having to fight this whole thing when he's in his 50s. And so that's also really interesting because he's had 50 years to master his superpowers. He has 50 years of wisdom, but he's now also having to deal with a new threat of super powered soldiers and stop a regime that ideology wants to kill him and essentially wipe out his genocode, for lack of a better word here.
Yeah, obviously he wants to stop that, and he's also concerned about the spread of this information, because it's kind of like, the spread of nuclear secrets, that we tried so hard to keep, from proliferating. It's a similar in the universe with superheroes, that the ability to make superheroes would be, or super powered people would be, the equivalent of being able to make an atomic bomb. Basically, in some ways, it'd be more effective than making an atomic bomb, because you've got an intelligent weapon that doesn't have to destroy indiscriminately. It just destroys what you want it to destroy. So having a super soldier in a lot of ways is better than an atomic bomb, especially ones with the kind of powers we're talking about too, and not just being Daredevil or something like that, or this is like being the Hulk or the Thing or something along those lines.
So because that's kind of what's going on with it, and because it's so interesting, right? Because now we're getting into this whole situation where you have to use a superhero to stop another super soldier. So you're using a super soldier to stop another super soldier, and you now have this whole parameter. And I don't know if there's any governance in play. I don't know if he's a rogue actor. I don't know if he's going on his own. I don't know where his brother is exactly. I don't know if there's other allies now in play. But like, you got this whole thing going on. And this is the part, and I think this is where this is going to get really interesting, is that, like, now what do you do here, and where are these super soldiers going to attack? Where are they going to be going after? And that's what's going on. And you also have age differences, and it's just, I mean, there's just so much going on with this. And this is what makes it fascinating, because you got the super soldier stuff, and it was just an 18-year-old versus an 18-year-old. That's one thing. But you probably have an 18-year-old versus a 58-year-old. You have somebody who's been out of retirement in the scene. And so I don't know if you ever heard the phrase "styles make fights."
Yeah.
This is that. And so like this is where we're going with this. But then we also get the fact that where we have flashbacks, and I don't know if his flashbacks are also going to come somewhere into the present, where he is 40 years later, and if something's going to pop up. And
there's no time travel like that. It's more like I'm trying to cover this whole history, in one book of this of the comic book universe. So we've got, so I'm telling his story as a child going forward, and I'm telling his story as an adult going forward. I'm also, in the bonus features in the back of the book, I'm providing prose stories that kind of help fill in the time gap too, by telling the story of his daughter, who we get to meet in issue 2. And she's got some issues of her own. So by telling her story as well, I'm kind of covering a lot of that time gap as well, that I can't fill unless I had 50 issues of a comic book, because obviously, a couple thousand word prose story, I can cover a lot more ground than I can in a comic book, simply because of the needs of the art. But
let me ask you about that, because I wrote a really, really rough review on Scott Snyder and Jeff Lemire's AD After Death. And my issue with that comic was that half the book was in prose and half the book was in comics. And I love the concept of it. I thought AD After Death was 3 issues. I thought it was brilliant. But in the middle of it, we're getting prose. And I said, this is not what I bought for $12 an issue. Right? Maybe it wasn't $12. Maybe it was like $8 an issue, 40 pager by Image. Love the concept. Love the idea of it. Hated the fact that we got like 6 pages of prose written in script. And I'm just like, motherfucker, why? Reading script is hard. It really is for me.
You don't have to read the prose sections in the bonus. These are only in the bonus features. You don't have to read them. They are like bonus content and
So
so it's a full 24 page, well in this case 28 page comic book with bonus features in the back for the
so
digital that you can
the
find.
reason why I bring this up and I asked the question about is that you're still though providing content in a prose position
Yeah,
that only enhances, right?
right. It does
So
not, you
so
don't need to read it to know the story.
and that's where I think it's interesting, right? Because it will help, I think, somebody if they want a full bigger picture of
Yeah,
this. But like that's so like and I think it's so interesting because in 1,000 words you could tell 5 years and it would take you 5 issues and 15 grand to accomplish the same thing in a comic book.
that's exactly right.
And so and we'll just state the obvious here. Making comic books is expensive. It's
Mhm.
expensive and it's time consuming. And I don't know how many people are gun ho on dropping 15K to tell something and have infinite amount of money to tell every little component at the beginning of starting something. So,
Right.
but I think it's really interesting that you're doing that because it is world building. And I think it's a unique way how to world build is telling part of the story in prose as a bonus feature.
Right. That's what I hope. I mean, if anybody's read like Watchmen, for example, if you remember Watchmen, there in the back of the book there was always these little bonus articles in there that it kind of filled out the story of these all these characters because it was only a 12 issue book and it covered a lot of years and a lot of different superhero, a lot of different characters as well. So that's how Alan Moore, kind of gave you a little more bonus by having those little bonus articles in the back of the book. So I'm kind of trying to do something similar here.
There was also the story about the pirates, but that's a
Yeah, yeah,
too.
that was more of a I think that was more I don't know, a metaphor for something. I was never sure totally what the pirates meant, but I think it was a metaphor he was trying to get across with the story of the
it was
pirates.
something. It was
Um,
something. It was
and
something. Oh,
but I'm really referring to the different little article clippings. For example, there was a superhero who we never even meet in the Watchmen, who was a member but he died, and I think there was an article about how he what happened to him in there. So it gives you the little backstory on the other team members. So for example, in my bonus article, I'm mentioning a superhero team that we may not see in the book for another several issues. So you find out about their history, for example, and I'm trying to expand this to tie in, eventually with my other comic books, because in this issue, we're also going to see a character who's been in Vicious Vixens and in Shark of War is going to have a surprise appearance here. Um, so we're going to meet them for the first time in a younger version of them because this is taking place in the after the Cold War, and Shark of War takes place roughly in modern times. But we're gonna see how it all starts to tie together into one complete universe.
so there's a lot to talk about. So I want to table that side. And I want to talk about something else with your book too that I
Okay,
think is
sure.
interesting. Is that obviously you mentioned that Samson has some issues. I think he has some night terrors. Obviously he has PTSD. Might be a way to put it. And that's something that I think is also very interesting because he's not unscarred from the experiments, the war, all of his decisions. Because if you're in combat and
Mhm.
you're a super soldier and you're tracking down and stopping other super soldiers, fighting along soldiers, and seeing the horrors of war, especially World War II. Um, and my friend's grandfather was in World War II, and he was joking about how D-Day was nothing. The Battle of the Bulge was the real fight, is what he
Mhm.
used to say, jokingly. Um, but there's no way you come out of war and having to make decisions, and we're starting to see some of the decisions he's going to be making. I mean, I think it's such an interesting component when you tackle, the morality and how superheroes deal with things. And I know that you have a tribute cover to Superman, in this Kickstarter. And one of the things is that Superman, and I think it's relevant to Samson to some degree, is that Superman has the ability to destroy Earth without even blinking if he wanted to.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying Samson has that much power, but there is heavy ways to crown when you have a lot of power,
Right.
and it doesn't come lightly, and it doesn't come without, I guess, you can know Superman doesn't have a good night of sleep.
Mhm.
Is the point I'm making. I would imagine Samson also doesn't have a good night of sleep.
Well, no, I mean he's got to, not only does he have to deal with these super, you know, problems with his powers, but he's got family issues that his powers have also, made worse. And I think you'll see that again in issue two is, the what's happened with his children. He's been experimented on, and he has, his DNA is messed up. His lifespan has been altered. His relationship with his wife has had a problem. And that's some of the stuff you get to read about starting in issue two, is when he goes back to Israel and he has to confront his family, who he hasn't, some of whom he hasn't seen in a while.
And I don't want to ruin too much of that. And then I want to go back to the other thing too that you mentioned is that obviously you stated that a character from Shark of War is going to be appearing
Mm-hmm.
much younger. So what is that like to not say have a perfect, universe and everything match up, but also introduce things and really start building out a complete universe and complete things and also making surprise appearances, cameos, because you have these IPs and you might as well do
Right.
it, right? I mean, and I don't know if it's going to directly increase sales, but it's a nice Easter egg to a degree. And also, it lets other people know in this book, hey, I have this other thing too out here that, and I'm not saying it's a complete, sales point, but there's something to be said about doing that if you can, and it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, Vicious Vixens is my, my best-selling book in terms of, backer count and dollars. So, being able to point to say to those people, hey, one of the characters is going to be popping up in Samson, hopefully will draw some of those backers to also consider getting Samson. Um, Similarly, Shark of War, getting some of those people to come over to Shark of War. And I'm hoping to do the reverse when Shark of War's next issue comes out later this year, and get some of the Samson readers to go over and try Shark of War. And and also I like the idea of having, some, continuity can, when you're Marvel, continuity, when, DC continuity winds up being a ball and chain around your neck at some point. But, I have, a few books, and, I'm just trying to fill in, a continuous timeline in a way that makes sense. I don't have to explain how, Reed Richards and Ben Grimm fought in World War II, and now they're still young enough to be, young enough to be, in their late 30s, early 40s in 2026. Or so I conveniently have to do, a reset where suddenly they no longer fought in World War II. They met back in, 2001 when in Afghanistan or something like that. When Ben Grimm was fighter pilot. I don't know what the current origin is exactly with that, but you get the idea. Is that they have to periodically cast aside their continuity, and it becomes to some degree a millstone around them. But for me, it's more about telling a complete story that's going to cover, 80 years of history, because I can do that because I'm sitting here at the end of it, not at trying to redo it every 20 years to make sense.
So I want to touch upon something, and I want to dive into just Kickstarter, discussions a little bit because
Mhm.
um, I don't know what it is to sell a book right now. I know that from my experience just on eBay, and it's a little bit different than comics, it is hard to sell stuff right now.
Oh,
Money
it's
is
definitely
tight.
gotten harder.
Money's tight. I have a theory on it, and people are not going to like my theory. Interest rates have changed to borrow money.
Hmm.
As a result of that, it's hard for companies to keep employees, pay them what they need to be paid, and a variety of other stuff. And borrowing money is more expensive.
Right.
Um, and so it is harder to float something because when it's 3% to borrow money versus 1.5% to borrow money, money's harder to do. There's also more shit to buy than there's ever been before, and there's more stuff to consume than there's ever been before. All those things definitely don't help.
Those latter two, I think, are the biggest concerns for me. I mean, I obviously, money, economics is always an issue, and money is tight. But what I'm seeing is, there are more comics out there. Marvel and DC, especially DC, I think have gotten better at their comics.
The other thing that I think people forget is that there's more free comics out there too.
Oh yeah, that's true too.
I'm not even talking about piracy. Not even pirating anything.
Yeah, like web cartoons and stuff. Yeah.
There's an app on my phone that every day I get to read a free manga chapter.
Mm-hmm.
It's on my phone. I wake up in the morning, while I'm eating my bran flakes or my waffle at my table before I go to my job. I'm reading a free chapter of manga. It takes me about 15 minutes while I'm eating my waffle, and it's free. And then the next morning, there's another chapter waiting for me, ready for me to be read. And so free. There's more free stuff than there's ever been before too. And getting somebody to pay you to do something or buy something for you is really hard. It's really hard when there's a free option, and the free option isn't bad. It's not like, it's good manga that you could go buy at Barnes and Noble. It's just digital. So, but this is where I'm going with this is that, sorry, I thought I heard something. My bad. So the point I'm making is that, like, when you get a free promotion in your book, I think it helps to some degree. Because any free promotion in anything right now just gives an edge, even if it's like a 0.3 edge on something. And so, like, that's where I think it's interesting when a character from Shark of War appears in Samson. It's like, oh, what's that character? And then somebody looks up and says, oh, that character's in this, and then vice versa, because unfortunately it's really hard to get somebody to buy something.
Right. Well, that's one point of that is that I'm doing is, if you go to the Kickstarter page, my Kickstarter page, at the very top of the page, there's a link where you can read issue 1 of Samson for free. So you don't have to pay. You don't have to sign up for my email list. You just click on the link and it will pop up in a downloadable Google Drive format in a PDF. You can download the PDF from the Google Drive. You can read it. You can send it to your friends if you want. Because I always give the first issue once I got the first issue done and I'm on to the second issue, I always give the first issue free. So, first issue of Vicious Vixens and Shark of War, you can get at my bitingcomics.com page. And if you sign up for my email list, you get those as well. So yeah, every Kickstarter, I'm always giving away my first issue. So I'm very much a try it before you buy it. If you like it, you'll hopefully want to back it and want to pick up the other issues. And I'm also trying to be very affordable with my digital content, especially if you buy all my comics. I think I sell them. If you buy my full digital bundle, it's less than $2 an issue. Actually, it's $1.50 an issue, which, I think is, it's not free, but, Marvel doesn't sell their digital comics for $1.50 an issue.
So let's talk about that too. So obviously, look, we were speaking before about my business. I try to keep things as economically affordable as humanly possible,
right?
In my business, and I don't think Kickstarter is any different on that front. Where obviously it costs money to produce your book, whether you're doing it digital or printing it. Obviously, if you print a book, it's going to be more expensive than if you do your book, digital, right? Just by nature. That's just the reality of it, because there's less cost in a digital book because you're not printing anything. But you still have to produce the art. But because what is that like? Because that's one of my biggest pet peeves is that I go on a Kickstarter and somebody wants to charge me like $18 for cover A of your book. There gets a point where I'm like, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
Yeah, if you want a hard copy, though, the economics just kind of work out that way. Basically, my books, my hard copy is $15, and that includes shipping in the U.S. So you figure $5 for shipping with packaging and stuff, and that's being a little low, using media mail and stuff, but it's probably a good $5 with bag and board and packaging. And then you figure the comic itself, you're talking a print cost, because I'm not Marvel or DC, I'm doing a small print run, $3 to $4. So that leaves $6 to pay for artist lettering and anything else. So it's really the margins are very small. And to be honest,
I'm not faulting. I'm not challenging on that. Where I'm getting at is that it's just really tough because
right.
It's a point when I look at these books, and this is why I don't back a lot of campaigns anymore. And it's just like, I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, it's really expensive for an issue to take a flyer on.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And I think it's a big problem right now. And especially when money's tight, like I have to be so fucking selective.
Well, that's the other thing I do is, not only, I explained, a single issue, I can only, I can't do that much. I'm kind of locked, I can't go, much lower. But if you buy, three issues 1 through 3 of Samson, I think that's $29 an issue. So now we're under $10 an issue. If you buy all my full back catalog, I think it's 17 comics for $90, and one of them's a hardcover collection. So there we're talking, we're getting down to $5 or $6, which is getting very close to what you pay for Marvel or DC. Plus, like I said, one's a hardcover. You're getting the digital issues thrown in. You're getting it shipped to you, and you're getting a full package. So that way, that's the way I try to make my stuff affordable for people.
I agree. So since we're talking about business, I can give a better deal the more you buy.
Right.
Just in cards, comics, and everything else, because the shipping doesn't change dramatically. So for me to ship 5 comics, it's the same shipping. So yeah. I'll take a little less money, or I'm willing to make a deal because I'm saving time and money. But it's not even the money that I'm saving, it's the time. Because if I can ship you 5 books to the same person, I just got rid of 5 books. I just made 5 sales, and I ship it once. It takes me the same amount of time to ship 5 books as it takes me to ship 1 book. It takes me the same amount of time to ship 40 cards as it takes me to ship 1.
All right.
So I don't have a problem making 25 cents a card versus making $2 a card if I'm shipping 40 cards to the same person. Because the time and the shipping cost is $5 to ship 40. The shipping cost to ship 1 is 74 cents. The profit margin is so much greater that, it just makes so much more sense. And it's 40 sales, which is so helpful. And that's the point I'm making. So like, I get that, but like, that's my biggest problem with Kickstarter is that it's really tough when the economy isn't great. Right. Because I just look at it, and I think that's one of the biggest problems. And then, there's other stuff I want to dive into because I don't want to push you too hard. And the other thing I'm curious about how you feel about this is saturation on Kickstarter, because there's so much. And there's people's campaigns that I knew they had a campaign. I'm looking to interview them. And then I say, I never saw your campaign, and I never saw any of your posts on Facebook, never saw it on Kickstarter, never saw anything. Like, how'd you not see it? I'm like, I don't know how I didn't see it, but there's so much content and so many projects that I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel like things get lost in the shuffle.
Oh, it's easy to get lost because, well, first off, Facebook and Twitter don't share your posts like they used to. Posts that you would get, maybe at hundreds of views on, you're now lucky to get 30 views on. So that alone means if you're not paying for ads or doing something like that, your reach to people is limited unless they're on your email list or otherwise, involved. So that's just the way it is. You gotta have the people on your mailing list and hope that they see it. I do agree that there's a lot of stuff on Kickstarter. I think I don't know if it's gotten more lately than it used to be, but it's always been, a couple hundred comic projects seem to be on there at any given time, that are running. So, you've got a lot of competition out there, and I got to hope you stand out, and, people want to come back to you, because a good chunk of my business is repeat backers. I rely on that because it's harder to get new backers now.
To even talk about that, I love my customers who retain with me and stay with me, and retention is hard though. Retention is hard. I don't know if you feel that way, but retention is so hard.
Yeah,
Right
it's tough. Yeah, I agree.
And so I mean I'm trying to figure it out. And look, I don't use an email list. eBay is a different piece collectively than comics. But retention, from my understanding, is hard, right?
Right.
I can tell though on YouTube who I'm retaining and who I'm not. And what I'm figuring out is that I have a small core that likes my content. But again, retention is hard on that too. And then I want to touch upon the other thing that everybody gets all upset about, and the not safe for work situation. So I am very confused on exactly what happened with Kickstarter, even though we're almost like a month out of the whole Kickstarter debacle. My understanding, and I'm curious how you feel about it, is that, and I maybe have a different viewpoint. I'm curious what your viewpoint is that Kickstarter said we're getting rid of it. Then they said we're going to reinstate it. And then, but you run the risk that we could cancel your project or the payment process. And I mean, it raises a lot of questions, right? Because, and I'm curious how you view that, because you have a book that is not the extreme of that, but definitely is a sexy book, with vicious vixens.
Well, I mean, I wasn't too worried because Vicious Vixens, I've done a not safe for work cover once, but so if I couldn't do it, it wouldn't be a big deal, because otherwise there's nothing that would violate that rule. So I wasn't too worried about it. At the same time, I prefer that they allow those books to be on the platform, as long as appropriate, warnings are making, and child safety and so forth like that is respected. I'm not, I'm fine with those books being on the platform. I think the issue for Kickstarter was Stripe or some, their credit card payment processor was pushing on them, and they caved, and then they realized how much of their business in comic books and comes from not safe for work projects, and they kind of uncaved for now. And I expect that this will, there may be some another shoe to drop at some point, but
it raises a question, and this is the question it raises, is that everybody went ape shit, and I'm really curious why. And I'll say the thing that nobody said is that, are people's businesses that predicated on not safe for work? Because I understand it is so tough and the margins are so thin that if you can do a topless cover and you can charge $30 and it costs you $4 to print, the margin is marginally higher. And was that what this was about? And this is, and you don't have to answer any question I want to ask here, but this is my whole question, is that, and my whole line of thinking, and I'm just looking at it from looking into the window and looking into the castle versus looking out of the castle. But that was my thought process, why everybody reacted so insanely.
I think maybe some of it's that. I mean, there's an economic interest. I think that, to be fair, though, there's an artistic freedom, interest that, that people who are in this community, hear the word censorship and they respond, badly to it, even though it doesn't necessarily reflect directly on their economics. I'm like I said, if they got rid of not safe for work, it wouldn't affect my books very much. But I don't support them doing that, because I prefer people to be able to read what they want to read and sell what they want to sell. So I think that's why there was a sharp reaction.
I mean, I'm a free speech absolutist, But my whole take on this is that in the principle of freedom of speech, I think what they were doing is bad. I also think that if their argument is child safety, newsflash, no 16-year-olds on Kickstarter.
Yeah, I don't think that was the argument. Like I said, I think it was purely Stripe doesn't want to approve this, and they want to stay away from
It's
it.
more
So,
complicated than that too, because there's a lot of stuff going on in the adult industry that also Stripe is dealing with.
yeah.
It's a much more complicated issue than comics. But the point I'm making is that I'm a free speech absolutist, so I'm not thrilled with it on the principle of it. But I also recognize that Kickstarter is a business and they're a private company, and it creates a whole big debacle and debate. But everybody freaked out, and then what I said, I don't know if anybody saw it, a bunch of people said nobody got hurt jumping off of a roller coaster. So before anybody jumps ship, let's just wait and see how this plays out. And if you just waited and see for about 7 days, they reversed their position. So there you go. Nobody got hurt if you didn't jump off.
Well, the other thing is the artistic community also is kind of like, some of them are very touchy and they're easily up. I wasn't up in arms about it at all, but I think that the personalities of some people are in the artistic community, as we've seen, can be pretty volatile. So, that probably, kicked them off a little. So it's kind of like kicking a bee's nest, or hornet's nest, to some degree. So I think, I don't know if anything more will happen with it. And, like I said, I wasn't overly concerned, and I'm glad they've gone back to the same policy as before. And, I hope they just stay with it for now.
Now, I'm just curious because my viewpoints looking into the castle are very different than looking out of the castle and being in the castle. And again, eBay has their policies and they do stuff. And I come from my perspective is that, I try not to violate policies and I try to push and maneuver around rules and regulations to try to bend rules a little bit. I try not to break them. But, I'm just curious because I'm always curious with people when that this happens and versing, because somebody who's doing it and doing a book, has a different viewpoint than me who doesn't do a book at the moment. I'm writing one, but it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a fun book. I'm struggling the middle of the first issue on a dialogue scene, just
Right.
like 3 pages. It's not working conceptually. The idea is there. It's just how to set up the scene is not working, but that's a different discussion for a different day.
Right.
But I do want to touch upon a few of your rewards though, because you mentioned some digital stuff. You got base covers, a base cover. You got a World War II cover, and then you got a Superman homage to Superman tribute cover of Trial of Samson. And Superman has done nothing wrong, but sometimes he looks like he is doing something wrong. So what's the story behind that?
Well, we always do a Superman homage cover every issue so far, and this issue, there's the classic golden and silver age, mainly silver age covers of Superman, where it looks like he's done something horrible. If you go to the Kickstarter page, in fact, there's a couple of good examples of those kind of covers where he's being accused of being a murderer, and then there's another one where apparently he had a twin brother that he's been hiding locked away in a dungeon for years because he was jealous of him. So we kind of went on that idea where in this case Samson's being accused of being a traitor to the Jewish people, and in a scene, of course, that's not what happened at all. But it was kind of fun to come up with that cover. In the previous issue, the cover was the first appearance of Supergirl, and then in the very first issue cover is probably the most controversial cover was the Alex Ross cover, where he pulls off his shirt to reveal his Star of David underneath.
Because I like homage covers.
I like doing them too. If we can think of a good way to do them, we've done them for Shark of War. We've done them for definitely for Shark of War. A little bit for Vicious Vixens, but more Shark of War's had a number of homage covers.
I think it's smart. I think it's fun. I think because they sell too, right?
Yeah, usually, you can charge a little more, and so if you can get the cover at the right price, it makes a good sense. And if you get people to, you have to have, if you're going to fund, you have to have people buy more than, some people have to buy more than just the digital comic book, because you figure $3,500, at $5 for a digital comic book, I need 700 backers to make my funding, and getting 700 backers is, I mean, that's a challenge even for, very popular indie creators to get 700 backers. So you have to have some backers to who buy, not only the hard copy, some people have to buy, all the covers, and this way there's a tier there for people who really want to, something, premium to back, and that just helps.
I have a term for it. It's called a pump up or
Yeah.
an upsell.
Mhm.
So you need to upsell, pump up, have pump ups. Have somebody come in for a base cover and then also add on a cover. And that really helps to get you funded and over the position, because it's numbers and it's those pump ups and pump ins
Right.
that really fund people. It's the same thing on eBay. It's the same thing with everything else.
Yeah, and the one thing on Kickstarter, we can offer some real premium type stuff like you in the book. I have a couple of people who paid to be in the book, this issue of the book, and they we do a good, I try to do a good job with people who do that. I not just give them one panel where their face is shown, but give them a couple panels and even a few lines of dialogue. And in this one, there's actually a couple of good scenes where one of the scientists who's helping is get several lines of dialogue to to provide some expounding of stuff.
No. It makes sense. And then obviously your whole catalog's out there and a bunch of
Hmm.
other stuff, And then I think, if there's something somebody wants and it's not there, I mean, they could probably DM you a
Oh yeah,
Kickstarter page.
I've done reward tiers where people have asked for something special. Yeah, on Vixens, in fact, somebody said, "Hey, can you give me this one print as a bigger size print?" And I, immediately said, "Sure," and I offered it, and it definitely paid to do that, because not only did he buy it, back it, but several other people backed it too.
So obviously there's a lot of stuff, and then everything in between. So obviously, I mean, and we didn't really get to touch upon most of it because I don't want to ruin too much what's going to happen.
Oh,
Obviously, there's a lot of, I want people to go out and buy your book, or at least back it,
oh,
or at least reread the first issue, which is on the Kickstarter. So obviously, I'm going to give you a chance to promote yourself. So obviously, the link for the Kickstarter is in the description, everybody, for everybody watching that, so you can check that out. First and foremost, so you don't have to share the link. I got the link for everybody in the
awesome, that's great.
description. But where can people find you, bother you, hit you up? Check out every other work you do. Check out this Kickstarter, back it, all the shebang, social media, whatever else we're gonna call this.
Bitingcomics.com is the best, because there, if you enter your email list, you'll get to read. You'll get 4 free comic books. You'll get my Sharkivore guide to how to avoid a shark attack. You'll get a thing to make a paper toy shark if you'd like, if you're into doing crafty stuff. So that, and you'll get my newsletter where I'll tell you more about my comic books and ask you to back. But yeah, that's the best one. At Sharkivore on Facebook is where I post stuff for Facebook. B Lacy one on Twitter, but if I'm honest, I don't use Twitter or Instagram much anymore. I just haven't found them to be very useful for promotion. Facebook is kind of marginal, but I'm on there because most of the comics community that I integrate with are on there, so I stay on there more, as much to communicate with them as to because I think it's useful for communicating with my readers. So yeah, so those are the best options. And like I said, I'm glad you put up the Kickstarter page. If people just click on it, there's a link at the top. They can reach Samson #1 for free, and they don't have to sign up for anything.
And then since it's my show, I promote myself all the time.
Awesome.
Obviously I pop out and make comics on Twitter, working on getting my account back. apparently, if you attack baseball, people, preferably the New York Mets, they are not a fan of that. I am very creative, and my hatred as a Met fan to the Mets is extensive. I also attack the Yankees too. So I am right now suspended on Twitter, but that's all right. That's all right. And somebody started a fight with me on Twitter, so I had to finish them. And Twitter didn't like that. But I'll get it back. So I'll be back eventually. Pop Anime Comics on Instagram. Love Instagram. A lot of cool stuff's coming out there. Pop Anime Comics on Facebook. Join me there. Pop Anime Comics on TikTok. Pop Anime Comics on YouTube. Please subscribe. I got a lot of content. I got 2,100 videos. Got like 1,200 interviews on YouTube. And I'm going to be adding a lot more stuff. A lot more stuff is coming in the next 6 months or so. Probably another 400 to 500 videos of content is coming. And I'm going to be opening up my vault to some interviews that were never released of some cool people. So you're prepared to be amazed is how I'm going to phrase it. And then the final thing I run, actually 2 more things. eBay, look for comics and collectibles. Come shop with us on eBay at Pop Anime Comics Collectibles. And I sell books like this in my store. I sell books like this in my store. I sell comics like this in my store. I also sell cards like this in my store, along with stuff like this in my store, which is a limited 25 Angel Reese. And about 6 months ago, I had one of these in my store, which is a 101 Diana Taurasi card. Card was in my store for about 15 minutes before it sold out. So I do get 101s. I go big. I go hard. You never know what's going to come into my store. I have a lot of cool 101s. A lot of cool stuff is coming. And right now, I got a lot of Knicks stuff in my store because the Knicks won, the championship, and I'm a New York kid. So got a lot of stuff there, got a lot of cool stuff, and I've been saying it forever on eBay. Go to my eBay store if you're looking for cards, comics, collectibles. Browse through my eBay store. If you found what you're looking for, you are more than welcome to make an offer to me. And if I don't like your offer, I will just say no, thank you. There's no harm in asking, or I'll counter you, and we'll figure out how to make it work. And then if you don't see what you're looking for, shoot me a message on eBay because I may have it. It's just not listed because I move out merch every 90 days and bring in new merch and all sorts of cool stuff. Or I'm going to be able to get it for you because I got a lot of connections. And if I can't get it for you or it's a product I don't carry because I don't carry everything, I probably know somebody who has it and I will point you right in their direction. I just had a client of mine who was in that situation, point them in the right direction. He got what he needed because I get collecting is hard. And picking up what you want and finding it sucks. And it's hard. And finding it for good prices is hard. So happy to point you in the right direction, help you get what you need, everybody. And that's what I do. And again, my stuff, just Pop Anime Comics, just type it in Google, you'll find me. You'll find me, or it's in the link down below. And I'm more than happy to help everybody out with what they need, finding what they need, and all sorts of stuff like that. And you don't get suspended on Twitter. Just say, let's go Mets. So just remember that they did. I think they won today too, which is a change of pace. Change of pace. It's a miracle. Should have put like 10,000 on that team today. But we can't all be perfect. But I did pick Norway. I did pick Norway today. I want to make that crystal clear. And France, but France scared me for a minute. They scared me for a minute in that game. But I digress. But that's everything I got going on, and I'm going to give you the final word.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, please check out Samson. Go to the Kickstarter link, read issue 1. If you like it, please consider backing for more of the series. There's digital bundles that are incredibly cheap. There's as we were discussing, there's the more comics you buy, the cheaper it gets. There's some cool add-ons and cool variant covers. There's also a cool Samson poster that you can get as an add-on. So I hope you'll check it out, and I hope you'll consider backing me. I think you'll really like the issue if you like superhero comics, if you like adult comics with not R-rated comic content, but with mature, thoughtful content. I think you'll really find something for you in Samson. Thank you.
And I don't think I have any more questions, everybody. And that is a wrap.
Awesome.